At 5:43 on a Thursday morning, $42,000 disappeared from Blake Renovations. It did not leave with the clean finality of a check I had written. It vanished from our merchant account under a red notice that said the cardholder had disputed the charge. By 6, the processor had also placed part of our next payout under review. Payroll was due the following afternoon. $38,640 for the people who had spent months turning a concrete shell in a Chicago high-rise into a finished home. Another, $19,200, was due Monday to the millwork shop that had trusted my word. The cardholder was Preston Vale, a technology founder who had already moved into the penthouse, filled it with furniture, and hosted a private product celebration in the great room. He now claimed we had not properly delivered. His dispute said the renovation was materially incomplete, that key contracted features were missing, and that the final payment should never have been collected. I read the notice twice, then opened the photographs from his event on my phone. Behind Preston, visible in almost every image, were the motorized glass partitions, the walnut media wall, and the lighting scenes his claim described as unfinished. He had used the work. He had praised the work. Now he was betting that a small company could not survive long enough to prove it. What he did not know was that we had recorded every workday from demolition to the last cabinet adjustment. Not because we expected betrayal, but because that was how Elena Torres ran our projects. The question was whether ordinary project records could become strong enough evidence to keep one dishonest reversal from breaking a good company. My name is Jordan Blake. I was 40 years old then, and I owned Blake Renovations. We were not the largest residential contractor in Chicago, but we had built a reputation that mattered to me more than size. We took complicated homes apart carefully, put them back together correctly, and paid the people who made that possible when we said we would. I had 14 full-time employees, a core group of specialty subcontractors, and vendors who answered my calls, because I did not treat their invoices like suggestions. I wore the same navy work jacket over a gray shirt most days, whether I was meeting a client in a glass tower or checking a framing line in a dusty townhouse. I liked order. I liked clean schedules, numbered change orders, labeled samples, and decisions recorded before they became arguments. My fear was not losing a rich client. It was looking one of my employees in the eye and saying his paycheck had to wait because I had trusted the wrong person. Elena Torres understood that fear without me explaining it. She was 36, wore her dark hair in a practical ponytail, and usually moved through a site in an olive work jacket with a tablet tucked against her side. Years before the Vale project, she had created our daily record system after a harmless disagreement on another job cost us 2 weeks of unpaid labor. Every workday, the project manager or supervisor opened a cloud log before the first crew arrived. They photographed each active room from fixed angles, entered who was on site, noted deliveries, recorded blocked conditions, linked approved changes, and closed the entry with end-of-day images. The software stamped the upload time, but Elena never treated a timestamp as magic. A photo mattered because it matched a drawing, an invoice, a delivery ticket, an inspection, or a written decision. Her rule was simple. A record should make sense to someone who had never stepped inside the room. Calvin Price had spent more time inside unfinished rooms than anyone I knew. He was 55, with a shaved head, a short gray beard, and the patient eyes of a man who could see a crooked reveal from 20 feet away. He had joined me when Blake Renovations was still 2 vans, a borrowed office, and a line of credit I checked every morning. Calvin was our site supervisor and master carpenter, but he was also the person most likely to tell me when my confidence had turned into stubbornness. He believed craftsmanship was a promise, yet he never confused a beautiful project with a safe business decision. Preston found us through Naomi Chen, the interior designer he had hired for his new home. Naomi was 42, wore a precise black bob and elegant cream or charcoal jackets, and had a reputation for interiors that looked calm, because every decision underneath them had been difficult. She did not work for me. Preston paid her, and she was clear about where her responsibility began and ended. She controlled design intent to finish selections, furniture coordination, and installation. I controlled construction means, schedule, labor, and cost. That boundary would matter later. The project was a 7,200-square-foot penthouse on the 48th floor of a new tower in Chicago's West Loop. Preston had bought 2 unfinished units and combined them. He wanted a private elevator vestibule, a gallery, a kitchen built for catered events, a walnut media wall, a glass-walled office that could disappear behind motorized pocket partitions, 3-bedroom suites, a library, an acoustic listening room, and lighting scenes that could change the entire apartment with one control panel. The original construction contract was $720,000. Approved changes eventually added $66,000, bringing the total to $786,000. We build by milestones because no contractor should finance a for-luxury renovation out of hope. The deposit was $118,000. The next payments were tied to demolition and framing, rough mechanical and electrical work, cabinetry and stone, and substantial completion. The final balance was $42,000, a little over 5% of the total. Keeping the final piece, or relatively small, was deliberate. The closer a project gets to completion, the more leverage shifts toward the person already standing inside the finished property. I normally required bank transfers for projects of that size. Card payments carried fees, could trigger reserves, and created a formal dispute path that did not exist in the same way, with a cleared transfer. Preston insisted on using his company charge card. He said Vale Systems centralized executive housing expenses through one account. The points were valuable, and the billing cycle helped his treasury team manage liquidity around a pending financing round. He was open about that from the beginning. He also offered to cover the processing fee. I discussed the risk with our accountant, adjusted the contract language to identify the payment channel, and accepted it. Calvin did not like it. He leaned against the conference table after the contract meeting and said, "A millionaire can have a cash flow problem, just like anybody else. The difference is, he can make his problem look like your opportunity." I told him the milestone schedule protected us. "It reduces the damage," he said. "That is not the same as protection." He was right, but the project mattered. It would keep our crews busy for nearly 9 months, deepen our relationship with Naomi, and place our work in a building where one successful renovation could lead to 3 more. Preston was decisive, intelligent, and unusually good at describing the feeling he wanted from a room. In the first meeting, he stood in the raw concrete space with his brown hair graying at the sides, a white shirt open at the collar, and an expensive blazer that somehow stayed clean in construction dust. He looked across the skyline and said, "I do not want a showpiece people are afraid to touch. I want a home that can become a stage for one night and feel private again the next morning." That was the kind of challenge I liked. It was also the kind that made me believe flawless work could overcome a difficult relationship. That belief had built my company. It was also my blind spot. For the first 6 weeks, Preston was almost an ideal client. He answered questions quickly, respected Naomi's recommendations, and seemed to enjoy the discipline of a well-run site. He would arrive before work in polished shoes, step around cords and stacked drywall, and ask questions that showed he had studied the drawings. He wanted to know why the pocket partitions needed a deeper header, how the acoustic isolation clips worked, and whether the kitchen stone could be book-matched across the waterfall edge. When I explained a trade-off, he made a decision. When I showed him a cost, he did not flinch. The first pressure point sounded reasonable. Naomi had specified white oak for the library, but Preston saw a walnut sample in the millwork shop and wanted the media wall, office cabinetry, and library shelving changed to a continuous dark grain. The material cost was higher, the veneer sequence had to be reserved, and the shop drawings needed revision. I priced it as change order 14 for $21,800 and added 9 working days. Preston approved the amount but circled the schedule impact. 9 days for a wood decision, he asked. Not for the decision, I said. For new drawings, veneer selection, fabrication, finishing, and installation. The event date cannot move. At that point, the event was still 5 months away. He had mentioned it during design as a private launch dinner for Vale Systems, not a hard construction deadline. Now he said investors and product partners would be flying in on the second Friday in October. The penthouse was not just his home. It was part of the presentation. Naomi looked at him across the sample table. Then every later decision has less room. I make decisions, he said with a smile. That is not our problem. The problem was that decisive people can create delays faster than hesitant ones when every decision expands the work. 2 weeks later, he changed the glass office partitions from manual panels to motorized pockets controlled through the lighting system. Then he added concealed speakers in the gallery, upgraded the kitchen refrigeration, requested a floating stone bench in the primary bath, and asked us to recess a motorized art screen into a wall that had already passed rough inspection. None of those requests was absurd. Each one improved the home. Together they added cost, coordination, and risk. I refused to start added work on a verbal instruction. Preston treated that as a personal lack of trust. We are standing in the room, he said one afternoon. Naomi heard me. You heard me. Why do I need another document before someone moves a junction box? Because the junction box affects electrical, drywall, millwork, programming, and the finish schedule, I said. The paper is not about whether I heard you. It is about making sure all 5 people who touch the change understand the same thing. He glanced toward Elena, who was photographing the wall before demolition. And the pictures. Daily record of a blank wall. Today it is a blank wall. Tomorrow someone may need to know where the conduit was before we closed it. He gave a small laugh. You run construction like a crime lab. Elena lowered the tablet. We run it like someone else may need to understand it later. Preston smiled at her, but the warmth had thinned. Just, do not let the documentation become the work. Elena waited until he left, then linked the photograph to change order 19 and the revised electrical drawing. She did not make a comment. Her silence usually meant she had decided the record could speak for itself. Naomi was not automatically on our side in those discussions. When I priced custom bronze trim around the media wall, she challenged 4 labor hours and asked why field measuring had not been included in the original scope. She was right, we removed the charge. When Preston requested a different stone after fabrication had begun, she documented that the resulting restocking fee belonged to him. Her credibility came from consistency. She did not protect anyone from facts, including me. By late summer, the approved changes totaled $66,000. We revised the contract total to $786,000 and redistributed the remaining milestones, so the final balance stayed at $42,000. That number mattered to me. I did not want a 6-figure amount hanging on a last walk through a finished home. Still, acceleration costs were rising. We added a second shift for millwork installation, paid premiums for weekend elevator access, and coordinated trades in rooms that normally would have been completed one at a time. Calvin confronted me after I approved overtime to recover 3 days lost to Preston's late art screen decision. The apartment was quiet except for the ventilation fans and the distant metal click of an electrician closing a panel. He stood in the half-finished gallery, earth-tone workshirt dusted at the shoulder, and held out the revised schedule. Tell me which line says the client pays if we burn out the crew chasing his event, he said. The acceleration allowance covers it. It covers dollars. I asked about people. We rotate the shifts. And when the next change comes, we price it. Calvin shook his head. You are still trying to impress a man who already hired you. That landed because it was true. I told myself I was protecting the schedule. Part of me wanted Preston to look at the finished penthouse and understand he had chosen the right contractor. I believed proof of excellence could settle any tension created during construction. Calvin tapped the schedule with one thick finger. Prestige clients still create ordinary cash flow risk. The supply house does not care whose name is on the elevator directory. I said, we are at 70% paid. Booked is not safe. Paid by card is not the same as gone forever, and profit on paper does not make payroll Friday. I knew all of that. I had built milestone billing precisely because revenue, profit, and cash were different things. Revenue was what the company earned. Profit was what remained after the job costs. Cash was what was actually available when 40 people expected money at the same time. A company could be profitable and still fail because the timing did not line up. I had taught younger contractors that lesson. I just did not enjoy hearing it applied to me. The event date turned the final 2 months into a sequence of shrinking choices. Preston wanted the great room available for furniture staging 3 weeks before the dinner. Naomi needed 2 full days for art placement and styling. The lighting programmer needed the furniture plan before setting scenes. The audio-visual vendor needed the finished media wall. Our final coat of floor finish needed uninterrupted cure time. Each request made sense alone. Together, they required the apartment to be complete before the official completion date. Elena responded by making the records more precise. She created room tags for every final installation. Great room north wall, office partition pocket, kitchen island west end, lighting scene control. She photographed serial numbers on motor controllers, signed delivery slips, cabinet interiors before hardware covered the fasteners, and the same wide angles at the start and end of each day. When the freight elevator brought the glass panels up, she logged the building ticket, the carrier receipt, and the condition of every crate. Preston came through during installation and watched 2 crew members guide the first glass panel into its concealed track. "That is finally starting to look like something," he said. Calvin, who had spent 3 days checking the pocket tolerances, said, "It looked like something before. You just could not see it." Preston laughed as if Calvin had made a joke. "I only pay for what I can see." Calvin looked at me after Preston walked away. Neither of us said what the sentence sounded like. The strongest warning arrived in an email that did not look threatening at the time. Preston asked whether we could describe the October event as beneficial occupancy rather than completion, because his company might reimburse a portion of the housing expense after the event. He copied his finance director and asked me to confirm that some close-out work could continue afterward. I replied carefully. The event could occur after substantial completion, I wrote, but occupancy would not change the contract standard. Any remaining work would be listed on a written punch list, and use of the premises would not convert completed items into incomplete ones. Naomi replied that her furniture installation required finished floors, operational lighting, completed millwork, and construction cleaning. Preston answered with a single line. "Understood. Keep us on the date." At the time, I read that as a financing classification question. Later, it looked like someone testing the language around acceptance. A week before the walkthrough, Preston pushed for one more change. He wanted the programmed glass partitions to open automatically during his product presentation, revealing the office as a demonstration area. The hardware already existed, but the sequence required extra programming and safety testing. I told him it could be done as post-completion event support, billed separately. "It is a setting," he said, "not construction. It is labor, coordination, and responsibility for moving glass in a room full of guests." He looked from me to Naomi. "Does every sentence in this apartment have a price attached?" Naomi answered before I could. "Every new request has a consequence attached. Sometimes the consequence is price." Preston approved the small change order that evening. He also sent me a message at 10:14 saying, "Jordan, I need builders, not librarians. Finish the home." I stared at the message longer than it deserved. Then I forwarded it to the project file and answered, "That is exactly what we are doing." By then, I had stopped wondering whether he was merely impatient. I was wondering why a man who demanded exact performance seemed increasingly irritated by the records that defined it. The final walkthrough began at 9 on a Monday morning. The construction dust was gone. Morning light moved across the pale limestone floor in the gallery, and the walnut surfaces had the deep, quiet color Preston had chosen months earlier. The office partitions slid into their pockets without a shudder. The kitchen island reflected the city in its polished edge. Calvin had placed blue tape only where he believed a client might reasonably ask for correction. There were 11 pieces. None was substantial. A drawer in the pantry needed its front lowered by 1/8 of an inch. One dimmer plate sat slightly proud of the wall. A bead of clear sealant at the primary shower had a cloudy section. 2 paint touch-ups were visible under evening lighting. The library ladder stop needed adjustment. A supply grill in the guest suite had the wrong finish. One concealed hinge clicked. The office partition sensor needed a slower closing speed. A cabinet light came on a half-second after the others. The stone bench needed a final protective treatment. A closet door rubbed at the bottom when opened fully. Preston walked with a printed copy of the scope. Naomi carried her installation list. Elena entered each item into the close-out log, while Calvin demonstrated completed systems. I operated the lighting controls. Naomi opened the appliances, checked the hardware finishes, and compared the millwork to her approved elevations. Preston asked questions, but he did not identify any missing room, missing feature, or unusable system. At the office partitions, he pressed the wall control. The glass panels moved smoothly into the walnut pocket and disappeared. "This is the moment," he said. "This is what people will remember at the event." Elena photographed him standing beside the open wall, not as a staged portrait, but because her daily log required a final, operational image of the installation. The picture showed the control panel illuminated, both glass panels fully retracted, and Preston looking directly into the completed demonstration area. In the media room, Naomi ran a short test through the audio-visual system and confirmed that the screen recess aligned with her wall composition. In the kitchen, the refrigeration alarms cleared and the caterer's equipment plan fit. In the primary bath, Preston ran his hand along the stone bench and said the finish looked better than the sample. At 11:32, we sat at the kitchen island and reviewed the 11 items. The digital form said the project was substantially complete, subject only to the listed punchwork. It also said the final balance would become due after those items were completed and documented. Preston signed with his finger on Elena's tablet. Naomi signed as design representative, confirming that the installed design conformed to her approved selections, except for the listed cosmetic corrections. I signed for Blake Renovations. Preston pointed at the words, "substantially complete." "That means you are not calling this perfect. It means the home can be used for its intended purpose, with minor close-out work remaining," I said. "Perfect is what we chase. Completion is what the contract defines." He smiled. "Then, chase fast." We finished 10 items by Wednesday afternoon. The replacement guest suite grill was delayed because the supplier had shipped brushed nickel instead of dark bronze. I did not hide it. Elena photographed the incorrect part beside the packing slip, logged the replacement tracking number, and notified Preston and Naomi. The correct grill was scheduled for Thursday morning, 8 days before the event. That small delay created the only real weakness in our close-out record. On Thursday, the delivery truck reached the building at 7:10. Calvin signed the carrier receipt. The freight elevator log showed the package going to the 48th floor. He installed the grill before 8. Elena had planned to photograph it during her opening round, but her tablet shut down after a damaged charging cable failed overnight. She used her phone for the rest of the rooms, and most images synced automatically when she reached the office. The close-up of the grill did not. She remembered taking it, but it was not in the cloud folder. At 8:26, Calvin called Preston, who was already at the airport for a trip to San Francisco. Calvin walked him through all 11 items and said the punch list was complete. I was beside him on speaker. Preston said, "Good. Naomi is there this afternoon. If she has no design issue, run the final card." Elena immediately entered that statement in the Daily Note. She also emailed a punch list completion summary with links to the 10 synced photographs, the delivery receipt for the grill, and a line stating that the final grill image was pending upload. Preston did not reply. Naomi arrived at 2 with her installation team. She inspected every punch item herself, including the guest suite grill. She did not sign our construction completion line because she was not the owner and would not pretend to be. Instead, she sent an email from her own account. I have reviewed the 11 items listed during Monday's walkthrough. From the design and installation perspective, all are complete. Furniture installation may proceed. She copied Preston, me, Elena, and her project coordinator. I called Preston once more before charging the balance. He answered from a car. "Naomi approved," I said. "Punch list is closed. I am processing $42,000 on the company card ending in 9164, as authorized in the contract." "Do it," he said. "Send the receipt to finance." The transaction was approved at 2:48. By Friday morning, it appeared as settled in our merchant dashboard. The fee was deducted, the revenue was booked, and our accounting system marked the project paid in full. I knew a card transaction could still be disputed, but there was no open complaint, no reservation of rights, and no request for additional work. We had a signed walkthrough, a closed punch list, Naomi's independent confirmation, and verbal authorization, repeated, in our daily record. Then the apartment transformed from project to home. Movers brought in rugs, art crates, a concert piano, dining chairs, and boxes marked private. The building's access system recorded Preston's residence credentials, activating that weekend. Naomi's team placed sculptures in the gallery, loaded books into the walnut shelves, and styled the kitchen. Preston slept there Sunday night. On Monday, he texted me that the primary bedroom was silent as a hotel suite should be, and asked Calvin to recommend a company for seasonal exterior window cleaning. Nothing in the message suggested he believed the home had not been delivered. The product event was Friday. We had no construction crew there. Preston hired us under a separate service ticket to have one technician on call in the building for the automated partition sequence, but the technician remained in the service corridor and was never needed. At 7:30, Preston stood in the great room before investors, partners, and senior employees. Naomi's photographer captured the glass walls opening on cue, the media wall displaying the product presentation, the lighting shifting from warm dinner mode to a cooler demonstration scene, and guests moving through rooms that his later dispute would call incomplete. Near midnight, Preston sent a group message to Naomi and me with one of the photographs. Behind him, the glass panels were fully open and the walnut wall glowed under the concealed lights. He wrote, "The place performed perfectly. Your teams delivered." I answered, "Glad it supported the night." Naomi replied with a simple thank you and a note that her photographer would send the full gallery Monday. For one weekend, I let myself believe the tension had been worth it. We had completed a $786,000 renovation, protected the final balance, closed the punch list, and watched the client use the home exactly as intended. I took my wife to breakfast Sunday and did not check the project log once. 4 days later, I opened the merchant dashboard at 5:43 in the morning and learned that a settled payment could still become unavailable cash. The dispute notice was written in language that made Preston's position sound cleaner than reality. It said the final charge had been made for completion of contracted services, but substantial elements remained undelivered at the time of payment. It named the motorized office partitions, the integrated media wall, lighting programming, and final guest suite finish work. It said Preston had allowed the charge only because he needed access to the residence for a previously scheduled business event and had expected us to return afterward. According to the claim, we had failed to cure the incomplete work despite repeated notice. Read, without our records, it was plausible. Large projects do open while minor work continues. Clients sometimes pay under schedule pressure. Contractors sometimes describe temporary operation as final completion. Preston had chosen the exact gray area most likely to confuse a reviewer who had never seen the penthouse. The immediate damage was not limited to $42,000. The processor debited the disputed amount from our available balance and placed $30,000 of pending card receipts into a temporary reserve while it assessed the size of the claim. Our merchant dashboard still showed the Vale invoice as revenue. Our job report still showed a profit. Neither screen could pay anyone. The operating account held $31,700 after automatic tax transfers and checks already issued. Payroll required $38,640 by Friday afternoon. The mill workshop expected $19,200 Monday. A stone supplier had another $11,000 due the following week. I called our bank first, not because it controlled the dispute, but because our line of credit was there. We had $60,000 available. Drawing it would protect payroll, but it would also add interest and reduce the cushion for every other project. I authorized $35,000 immediately. I did not tell the crew there was a problem. A business owner's panic should not become an employee's Thursday. Then I called Preston. He answered on the fourth ring. "Jordan, I received a notice that you disputed the final payment." There was a pause, just long enough to confirm it was not a misunderstanding. "I was going to have my finance team contact you. The claim says major contracted work was not delivered. You approved the walkthrough, authorized the card, moved in, and used the systems at the event. I approved access under pressure. That is not the same as accepting completion. You signed substantial completion subject to 11 items. We completed all 11. You completed what you considered the list. I considered the whole experience unfinished. I kept my voice level. The dispute names specific features. Which one is missing right now? That is not the only issue. It is the issue you submitted to recover $42,000. He exhaled. "Jordan, I am not trying to hurt your company. The project cost expanded, the schedule compressed, and I had to spend additional money to make the event work. What additional money did you spend to complete our scope? Event support, temporary staffing, consultants. Those were event costs. They were not construction completion. You see categories, I see the total experience." That sentence told me he was not disputing a defective hinge or a missing grill. He was trying to turn dissatisfaction with his own expanding budget into a refund from the last party still exposed. I asked him to withdraw the dispute and send any legitimate warranty list through the contract process. "I can resolve it directly," he said. "Refund $24,000. I will withdraw the claim and close the matter." "You want us to accept $18,000 for work you already approved and used." I want both sides to recognize that completion was not as clean as the invoice suggested. You get certainty now instead of waiting through a card review. There it was. His leverage was time. He knew $42,000 was small compared with the total project, but large compared with one payroll cycle. He did not need to prove his story that morning. He needed me to fear the delay more than I valued the truth. I told him I would respond through the formal process. "Formal processes are expensive," he said, "for both of us. Then facts should make them shorter." After the call, I sat alone in my office, with the merchant notice open on one screen and the payroll file on another. Taking his offer would cost us $24,000 plus the card fee and borrowing cost. It would also free the remaining $18,000 faster if he actually withdrew the dispute. Fighting could take weeks, and the processor's reserve might remain even if we eventually won. I thought about the people whose checks depended on decisions they would never see. I thought about the millwork shop owner who had bought premium veneer months before, being paid in full. Pride is easy when someone else carries the cash flow risk. Calvin came in before 7. He had heard from Elena, and he did not waste time pretending I looked fine. "How bad?" he asked. I showed him the balances. He read the numbers, then said, "Payroll first. Vendors get a call before they get an excuse." I drew on the line. "Good." He offered to settle for 18. Calvin looked at me for a long moment. "You asking what I would do, or what keeps the lights on?" "Both." What keeps the lights on is cash. What keeps the company worth owning is not letting a client buy a lie because he timed it well. Elena arrived with her tablet and a paper cup of coffee. "I pulled the dispute categories," she said. "They give us a response deadline in 9 calendar days. We can answer every named item." "Can we answer them in a way a reviewer will understand?" I asked. She put the tablet on my desk. "That depends on whether we send evidence or a pile." That distinction became the center of our decision. Photographs were not automatically proof. 1,000 unlabeled images could look like noise. Metadata could be challenged. A signed form could be interpreted narrowly. Naomi's email covered design, not every contract obligation. Our job was to connect each claim to the scope, the approval, the installation date, the acceptance, and independent corroboration. Before we started, I made 2 calls. I told the millwork shop we had a payment delay caused by a client dispute and offered half Monday with the balance within 10 days. The owner said, "You called before I had to chase you. We can work with that." I also told our accountant to model the next 6 weeks, assuming the 42,000 remained unavailable and the 30,000 reserve stayed in place. That model hurt more than the dispute notice. We could survive, but only by slowing equipment purchases, delaying my own draw, using the credit line, and collecting 2 other invoices exactly on schedule. So let me ask you the question I had to answer that morning. Would you take the reduced settlement to protect cash immediately or challenge a claim you knew was false and accept the cost of waiting? I chose the records, not because the decision was risk-free and not because I believed fairness moved faster than money. I chose them because Preston was not arguing that our renovation was bad. He was betting that I could not afford the time required to prove it was delivered. We turned the conference room into an evidence table. Elena projected the contract scope on one wall and the dispute claim on another. Calvin brought his field notebook, not because handwritten notes were stronger than digital records, but because they showed the same sequence from a different source. I opened the approved change orders and highlighted the 4 features Preston had named. The office partitions were in the original scope as manual glass panels. Change order 19 converted them to motorized pocket panels and added the control integration. Preston had approved the drawing, price, and schedule impact electronically. The daily logs showed framing modifications, conduit placement, track installation, glass delivery, motor commissioning, and final operation. The building freight record matched the delivery date. The hardware vendor's commissioning sheet carried the technician's signature and listed both motor serial numbers. The walkthrough photograph showed Preston operating the completed system himself. The media wall had an equally clean chain. Naomi's approved elevation identified the walnut veneer sequence, screen recess, speakers, and concealed lighting. The millwork shop's delivery tickets matched Elena's photographs of labeled crates arriving on the freight elevator. Calvin's notes recorded each installation day. The audiovisual contractor had a completion certificate for the screen and speakers. The event photograph Preston sent at midnight showed his presentation running on that exact wall. Lighting programming was more complicated. Programming changes continued until the day before the event, because Preston kept requesting different scenes. His claim described the system as incomplete at final payment. Technically, the core contract scenes were complete 2 days earlier, while the event sequence was an added service ticket. We had to separate those facts carefully. I did not want to win by pretending every late adjustment was unrelated. The contract required residence scenes. The added ticket covered a one-night presentation sequence. Elena linked the original programming acceptance report. Preston's approval of the extra ticket, the technician's building entry, and the event log showing the added sequence ran successfully. The guest suite grill was the weakness. The replacement receipt and building log proved a package arrived, but not that the correct part was installed. Elena searched the unsynced folder on her phone. The close-up was not there. She checked recently deleted files, local cache, and the cloud recovery page. Nothing. "I took it," she said. Her voice was controlled, but I could hear the anger she directed at herself. "I believe you," I said. "The reviewer does not know you." Calvin opened his field notebook. He had written, "Guest 2 grill replaced, dark bronze, 758. Useful, but still our own record." Naomi's email said all 11 items were complete, which included the grill, but Preston could argue she had relied on us. For the first time, the package had a gap Preston could widen. Elena went back through the daily photos in chronological order instead of searching by room tag. At 4:20 that afternoon, she stopped on a wide-angle image taken the next morning during furniture installation. The photograph was not labeled for the grill. It was labeled Guest Suite 2, Furniture Clearance Before Move-In. In the upper right corner, above a linen cabinet, the dark bronze grill was visible. It was not a close-up, but its finish, shape, and installed position were clear. The image also showed furniture carts in the room and protective floor covering already being removed. Elena enlarged it, then cross-referenced the frame with Naomi's installation schedule and the building access log for her movers. "This is better than the missing close-up," she said. She was right. The image had been created for a different operational reason. It aligned with an independent schedule and showed the room entering move-in condition after the replacement. We did not hide the missing close-up. In the response, we explained that the intended close-up failed to sync, then provided the delivery receipt, Calvin's note, Naomi's inspection email, and the next-day room image. Honest evidence is often stronger when it admits its limits. Naomi was the next question. We could submit her existing email without asking anything else, but Preston had paid her and might pressure her to reinterpret it. I called and explained the dispute claim, exactly as written. She was quiet for several seconds. "He says the media wall and partitions were not delivered." "Yes. They were operating before furniture installation. Will you confirm only what you personally observed and approved? I will review my records first." That was not hesitation. It was professionalism. She did not owe me loyalty, and I did not ask for it. The next afternoon, Naomi sent a signed statement on her firm's letterhead. It was narrow and precise. She confirmed that she had designed the listed features, observed their installation, reviewed them during the final walkthrough, inspected the 11 punch items, and authorized furniture installation after determining that the design work was complete. She confirmed that the office partitions, media wall, residence lighting scenes, and guest suite grill were present and functioning before move-in. She also stated that she coordinated the event installation and personally observed those features in use that evening. She did not comment on our billing rights or Preston's motives. An hour later, Preston called her. I learned about it because she documented that call too. He asked whether her statement could clarify that ongoing refinement remained after occupancy. Naomi told him ongoing refinement did not mean the listed features were undelivered. He said her wording could create unnecessary conflict. She answered that inaccurate wording would create a larger professional problem for her. Then she ended the call. Her choice did not make her my ally. It made her an independent witness whose reputation depended on the same facts ours did. We built the response as a timeline, not an accusation. First came the signed contract and the revised total of $786,000. Next came the payment schedule showing $42,000 as the final balance. Then the approved change orders for each disputed feature. After that came installation records tied to deliveries and daily logs. The signed walkthrough established substantial completion subject to 11 minor items. The punch list summary, Calvin's notes, Naomi's confirmation, and room photographs established closeout. Preston's card authorization and the processor receipt established that the payment was intentionally submitted. Building access records established move-in. Finally, event records established use. We included selected photographs, not every photograph. Elena created an index that identified date, room, related scope item, source record, and what the image demonstrated. We also offered a secure link to the full chronological log in case the reviewer requested it. The point was coherence. No single image had to carry the case. On the 8th day, we submitted the package through the processor's dispute portal. The file was large enough that Elena split the supporting documents into numbered exhibits and verified every upload receipt. The processor acknowledged the response and said the issuer review could take several weeks. It did not promise an outcome. It did not release the reserve. 5 days later, Preston submitted a rebuttal. He argued that the signed walkthrough established only substantial completion, not final completion. He said Naomi's authority was limited to design and that her furniture installation could proceed in an unfinished residence. He characterized our event images as proof of temporary functionality, not contractual delivery. He also said the final payment had been authorized under economic pressure because denying us the charge would have risked losing access before his event. That was the strongest version of his defense. He did not deny the photos. He changed what they meant. For a reviewer, the case had become two coherent stories. In ours, a client accepted a completed home, closed a minor punch list, paid, moved in, used the work, and then reversed the last payment. In his, a client tolerated an incomplete project for a fixed event, paid under pressure, and disputed when promised closeout did not occur. The same rooms appeared in both versions. The decision would turn on chronology, authority, and the exact moment acceptance became use. While the issuer review continued, Preston's attorney proposed a settlement call. The offer had changed. Preston would release the dispute if we refunded $15,000 and agreed that no party would make public statements. I had never threatened a public statement, but the clause revealed what he feared. Not exposure from me, but a record he could no longer control. My attorney joined the call, along with Preston, his counsel, Naomi, and a finance executive from Vale Systems, who had approved the card account. Naomi participated only to answer factual questions. We were not speaking to the processor, and nobody on the call could issue a chargeback verdict. The purpose was simple: determine whether a business resolution was possible before the review finished. Preston sounded calm. The home was usable, he said, but usability is not the contract standard. There were ongoing corrections after I moved in. I answered, there was one separate warranty request for a closet sensor after move-in. It was not part of your dispute, and we resolved it in 20 minutes. There were programming adjustments. For the event sequence, you ordered separately. His attorney asked Naomi whether furniture installation could begin before construction was completely closed. In some projects, yes, she said. Not in this one. My installation notice required finished floors, completed millwork, operational residence lighting, and cleared punch items in furnished rooms. Preston said, "You knew we were under deadline pressure." "I knew the event date," Naomi replied. "That does not change what I observed." Then, his finance executive made a mistake. He said the final charge had been approved as an accommodation to get the contractor off the site before guests arrived. Elena was not on the call, but she had prepared the exhibit that answered him. I opened the building access timeline. Our construction credentials were deactivated Thursday at 5:16, immediately after closeout. The final charge was processed at 2:48 that afternoon. Furniture crews entered Friday and Saturday. Preston's residential credential, activated Sunday. Our only later entry was the separately billed event technician who never entered the penthouse. We had not withheld access. We had already surrendered it. Preston shifted. Access was not just credentials. It was practical control of the space, I said. Then let us look at practical control. I shared the strongest document last. It was not a hidden photograph or a technical timestamp. It was an email Preston had sent at 12:18, the morning after the event, after the group text with the picture. The subject was penthouse follow-up. In it, he thanked Naomi for the installation, thanked Blake Renovations for completing the residence in time, and instructed his finance executive to classify the full renovation as placed in service as of the prior Thursday. He specifically listed the walnut media wall, automated glass office, integrated lighting, and guest suite completion as installed assets supporting the event. Attached was the event gallery. One image showed Preston touching the office control as both glass panels opened. Another showed his product presentation, operating on the media wall. A third showed guests' coats, stored in the finished guest suite beneath the dark bronze grille. We had not discovered the email by luck. It was in the ordinary project correspondence Elena had archived Monday morning, because it mentioned close-out and asset classification. Preston had described the exact work as complete to his own finance team, before he described it as undelivered to the card issuer. The call went quiet. His attorney asked for 5 minutes. When they returned, Preston did not apologize. He said the dispute had been filed during a broader review of project overruns and that the wording may have been too categorical. It was categorical enough to remove $42,000 from my company, I said. He offered to withdraw the dispute if we each absorbed our own costs. I agreed only if the withdrawal was submitted in writing. He confirmed the final balance was valid, and he paid the documented processor fee and a portion of our direct review costs. My attorney put the terms into a short settlement document that did not depend on a phone promise. Preston signed 2 days later and sent the withdrawal through his card administrator. Even then, the money did not return instantly. The processor required confirmation from the issuer and completed its own account review. 9 business days after the signed withdrawal, the $42,000 was credited back. The temporary reserve was released in 2 stages over the following 3 weeks. Preston paid $2,900 toward our documented fees under the settlement. We still carried interest on the credit line draw, and the original card processing fee was not magically erased. Winning did not make the disruption free. Payroll went out on time. The millwork shop received half on Monday and the balance 8 days later, exactly as I had promised. When I called to confirm the second payment, the owner said, the delay was not what mattered. The call was. I wrote that down. Preston faced consequences proportionate to what he had done. He paid the balance and part of the costs. Naomi completed her existing obligations, then declined to serve as design representative on another property he considered purchasing, unless acceptance authority and payment procedures were controlled independently. His finance executive required written legal review before future personal project card disputes. Preston remained wealthy. Vale Systems continued operating. The point was not to destroy him. The point was that he failed to convert his financial pressure into our loss. 3 months later, Blake Renovations had new payment rules. We capped card payments on large projects, required bank transfer for final completion balances above $20,000, and reduced most final balances to 3% by collecting more through verified milestones. Every walkthrough ended with a signed acceptance form that separated substantial completion, punch work, warranty work, and optional post-occupancy service. Change orders carried schedule effects in bold language. We also built an operating reserve equal to 8 weeks of payroll and core overhead. It took time and meant I drew less money that year, but I stopped treating a credit line as a substitute for cash resilience. I did not ban difficult clients. Demanding people can produce excellent projects when expectations are clear. I changed the assumption that excellent work would overcome a bad relationship. Craftsmanship and documentation were not competing values. They were two parts of delivery. The lesson was bigger than taking photographs. A photograph by itself may show a beautiful room without proving what the contract required when the work was completed, who approved it, or whether a later change was included. Our images became persuasive because they matched the signed scope. Approved change orders, delivery receipts, building access records, punch list confirmation, Naomi's independent observations, and Preston's own instructions. The strength came from consistency across records created before anyone had a reason to manipulate the story. I also learned to respect the gap between revenue, profit, and available cash. We had earned the final payment. The project was profitable. Yet for several weeks the cash was unavailable, payroll was still due, and vendors still needed to be paid. Small businesses rarely fail on a spreadsheet alone. They fail when timing turns a paper profit into an empty account. Payment methods, contract rights, issuer procedures, and dispute rules vary. So this story is general business education, not legal, banking, or financial advice. But the practical principle travels well. Define the scope, bill in milestones, record changes, document acceptance, preserve independent confirmation, and keep enough cash to survive a delay you did not cause. Would you have taken Preston's reduced offer or fought through the review? Every contract has a consequence, and the safest time to document your value is before anyone has a reason to deny it.